Sauce Gardner is only 2 months into his career, and he is already one of the 5 best corners in the NFL. There are a whole lot of stats that back that up, but there's even more film that backs it up as well. And considering that, after all, we are a film channel here, that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to frame this episode in 3 distinct parts that all kind of lay out the 3 main aspects of Sauce's game that make him so dominant in the first place. And that's going to be technique, instinct, and quite frankly, some of the most borderline reckless confidence you will ever see in any DB ever. But I mean that in a good way. So why don't we start with part number 1, technique. The big thing to understand about the Jets defense is that they mainly have 2 favorite coverages that they stick to most of the time. 50% of all of their coverage calls are either quarters coverage or straight up man coverage with cover 1. They run quarters more than anyone else in the NFL, and they are 7th in running cover 1. Meanwhile, they run cover 3 only the 22nd most out of any NFL team, and they are 31st in calling cover 2. So they absolutely have a comfort zone when it comes to how they structure their defense, and that comfort zone is pretty much anything that allows Sauce Gardner to just play press coverage. Whether it's in quarters or whether it's in cover 1, Sauce plays press man a lot. He has the 14th most snaps in press out of every DB in the NFL at 115 snaps and counting, which is in the top 7th percentile. And I don't necessarily blame the Jets for prioritizing that skill set because he is phenomenally gifted at it. If you go through all of the receiver duos that New York has played against this year, and I mean everyone from Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins to Deontay Johnson and George Pickens to even Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, all of those amazing weapons have at one point or another lined up against Sauce, and specifically on those aforementioned man coverage snaps, he's only allowed 4 total catches for 28 total yards. That in itself is utterly absurd. And yes, I know there have been 2 deep balls given up in zone coverage, but even in his zone coverage snaps, that's pretty much all he's given up for the year. If we include every single catch he's quote-unquote allowed, and I say that begrudgingly because that also includes all of the little routes in the flats, underneath his zones where he just has to rally and tackle. If you include all of that cheap yardage as well, plus the 2 deep balls, if we just take all of it together, he's still only given up 22.5 yards per game total. That is stupidly good, and it's especially stupidly good when you consider the gauntlet of receivers that he's gone up against this season. That all being said though, I do want to circle back to the technical discussion once again because him being such a patient, crafty technician is a pretty big reason why the Jets can get away with running the types of coverages that they like to run. As an example, this is a 3rd and 5 situation from the first game against Miami. It's in the 3rd quarter, and at the time, the Jets were narrowly holding on to a 2-point lead. New York is basically in a version of cover 1 double here on Tyreek Hill, so the linebacker is solely dedicated to walling off Tyreek inside over the middle, while DJ Reed plays him over the top, and everyone else in the secondary, of course, is on an island, including Sauce, who has the tough task of handling Jalen Waddle all by himself. Now, Sauce is lined up with inside leverage here, basically daring Waddle to try any sort of inside release for a route over the middle, and that's tough for Waddle because he actually is supposed to run an over route here, and he does need to try to make an inside release work through contact, and that's going to be pretty hard for him to do. It's a tall order to move a bigger corner like Sauce off his spot to open up that window for an inside release, and his method for trying to get Sauce out of position is an interesting one. And by interesting, I mean that it's an almost hilariously long foot fire release where he chops his feet multiple times just to try to influence some kind of panic in Sauce, like he's trying to get him to open his hips outside early. But with how patient and disciplined Gardner is, that was just not gonna work. And honestly, as soon as Gardner saw Waddle chop his feet that much, he knew that this was not going to be a go route down the boundary because nobody in the NFL chops their feet that damn much just to run a go route. If you watch any top tier receiver around the league, if they're going to run deep, they're just going to take off. They don't have time to waste and kind of do all these crazy extra steps at the line of scrimmage. They're just going to go because they have to get to their landmarks on time. So Waddle kind of tipped his own hand for what kind of route he was going to run there just by having so many little choppy steps on the release. But Regardless, Sauce stayed patient with his technique. He knew that he could just slide right into Waddle's hip pocket once he finally declared inside, and you can also see Gardner's hand placement here, which is equally important. He almost came in with kind of a clamping type of motion, one on the chest and then one on the shoulder blade on the back, and those 2 points of contact are critical for a corner to feel the momentum and the pacing of a receiver so that they know when to let go and when to start breaking down themselves as they're mirroring the route. Every great DB coach will tell you that if you have your hands on a receiver's frame, you're going to feel a route develop before you can even see it develop. So that contact is key, and Sauce is typically excellent at using contact to his advantage. Obviously, this play ended in a sack regardless, so Sauce wasn't even targeted, but throughout the season on press coverage snaps where he was targeted, you can still see how he uses contact in order to feel routes develop and to feel exactly when a receiver is going to turn for the ball or extend out to try to make a catch. It's not often that you can see a rookie corner with this good of technique and patience and discipline, but Sauce has it, and that's the main reason why he pretty much never gives up anything in man coverage. Beyond the obvious technical perfection though, I also want to give credit to his tremendous instincts as well. The way that he can read a split for a receiver in a certain formation to figure out what type of route is coming, or how he can find just little tendencies when it comes to a receiver's technique to pick apart. I mean, he clearly studies film all day, every day, like any true pro would, and he pretty much never seems surprised by anything. Hell, there are some times where I've seen him make reads based on tendencies that never even showed up on film before, but he'll still manage to sniff it out because that's just how good his instincts are. There's an example from the Patriots game where New England was backed up near their own goal line and Sauce was lined up about 7 or 8 yards off his receiver, Jakobi Meyers, and if you pay really close attention, you can see Sauce notice Mac Jones give Meyers just a very slight nod before the snap. The nod is a little bit more visible on the end zone angle, so maybe I'll show that little part here as well, just so that you guys can see it too. And what that nod meant was that even though the Pats had a run play called here, Jones identified that Sauce was all alone out there against Meyers and was giving a lot of space before the snap. So Jones had a tag attached to the play for Meyers to run a one-step smoke route, so that ideally he could just get the ball in space, try to break Sauce's tackle, and hopefully get a big gain out of it. This is a somewhat normal tag that I've seen a few different offenses use over the years. Kyle Shanahan for one, Lincoln Riley, and the old Tom Brady Patriots, even they did it from time to time. But believe it or not, the 2022 Patriots did not show this adjustment against off coverage anywhere on film the entire year. They never, ever did this from any formation, any personnel grouping. Whenever they saw a corner 8 yards off a receiver, I mean, ever. This was not on film, but just that little nod told Sauce that something was up, the ball was coming his way, and he had to be ready. And so he was. He immediately started charging downhill before Mac even fully had the laces in his hands, and from there, he secured the tackle for a 2-yard loss. That is a rookie corner in his 8th ever game sniffing out a pre-snap tag that he had never even seen on film before from that offense. It's just nuts, and it speaks to how much Gardner prepares and how ready he is for his opponents every single week. Ironically, I actually think the deep ball he gave up to Stefon Diggs last week on, I think like the first play of the game against Buffalo, if I recall correctly, weirdly enough, that was also a tremendous indicator of how respected he already is around the league, because the Bills know that he has to watch a lot of film. There's no way for him to be this good already without watching a lot of film. And so they attacked him early with a tendency beater that they had also never even done before, counting on the fact that he had probably been watching their film. I have gone back and I've watched every single route that Stefon Diggs has run off motion this year, and literally none of them were go routes. I mean, not one single time has Diggs seen a corner that was 7 or more yards off the line of scrimmage and run a go route off motion. There was a virtual certainty that if you watch all of his snaps leading up to that game against an off corner, he would run either a quick speed out to the sideline underneath that DB, or he would run a slant or a shallow route. He never ran deep, and so Sauce, armed with that information that he had leading up to that game, Even though he was in a cover 3 zone here, he didn't open up his hips and bail to a deep zone because, in his mind, this was 100% going to be a speed out underneath and he wanted to close on it quickly. Lo and behold, the Bills knew that he was probably studying them pretty intently. They prepared for him to be sitting on that route, and they respected him enough to break their own tendency and run something else to punish that assumption. I'm not going to sit here and praise Sauce for getting beat because he did get over aggressive and he did get beat. But I do think it's pretty fucking cool that arguably the best offense in the league is already having a game plan against the instincts and the football IQ of a rookie when he's like 2 months into his career. You don't see cat and mouse games with scheme between Stephon Diggs and a first-year corner basically ever. But with Sauce you do because he's not a normal rookie. He's just Sauce. And that's something entirely different. So when it comes to technique and instinct, that's a really quick and dirty breakdown of what makes Sauce so good in those areas despite being such a young player still. He is a really good technician and he's super instinctive despite being a rookie, and that's pretty rare. But the third piece of the pie that I mentioned earlier, confidence, that might actually be the most important piece of them all. And boy, he does not lack confidence. What I want to try to address is what is it about his technique and about his instinct that actually gives him the confidence to play, for lack of a better word, like a total asshole. And I mean that as a compliment. I actually really love his style of play. But let's be honest, he plays like a total asshole. What is it about his technique that lets him get away with doing that? And I think that's a fascinating question, and I will answer that question, but first things first, I gotta pay some bills, and I wanna thank Upside for sponsoring this week's show and helping to make all of this possible in the first place. There's no sugarcoating it. Stuff is super expensive right now. Gas, groceries, dining out, all of that costs a lot of money, at least more than it used to. And I'm not a macroeconomist. I'm not smart enough to even pretend to understand why inflation happened or how it works, but I do know that it happened, and I know that it kind of sucks right now, so we're all looking for ways to save money, and Upside, at least for me, is one of those ways. Upside will help you earn cash back on whatever purchases you're going to be making, again on gas, groceries, dining out, among other things. And especially for me, gas has been a big one lately because I live in California and we don't have public transportation, so I have to drive everywhere, and gas is really important. But anyway, on the app, all you have to do to claim an offer for whatever you're buying is check in at the business, pay as you normally do with your credit or debit card, and then you get cash back on Upside. So it's very easy to do, and if you want to try it out for yourself just to make your purchases hurt a little bit less, you can download the free Upside app and use promo code FILMROOM, and that will give you $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Again, that is promo code FILMROOM for $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of at least $10. Thank you again to Upside for sponsoring today's show, and with that, let's get back to it. Confidence is a corner's best friend because with confidence in one's own instincts and techniques comes the ability to play loose. And when you play loose, you play with the kind of controlled aggression that makes elite football players elite in the first place. Let me give an example here because it's easier to understand what I mean by controlled aggression if you can see it in action for yourself. This play is 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter on 4th and 3, and the Jets are holding on to a 1-possession lead. If they get a stop here, they could pretty much just win the game. So in this crucial situation, Sauce is out on an island one-on-one against Courtland Sutton. Given the score differential, Gardner knows that he can give up basically anything other than a touchdown here and be okay, so he's completely selling out to stop deep balls down the boundary, which Sutton does happen to be running. So I want you to look closely at the technique that Gardner employs to stop that particular route. Right off the snap, Sauce steps up and inside with his inside foot, which from a biomechanical perspective, that makes it easier for him to then step back with his outside foot and open his hips early so that he can get out quickly and stay on top of the release. Playing this route from the top down at the start is key because Sauce wants to dictate the type of throw that will come his way. Again, the only thing that he really can't afford to give up is a touchdown down the boundary. So he's got to put a cap over the top of Sutton early, and at least in terms of how a quarterback is going to read that release, he wants to basically force Brett Rypien to not drop the ball in the bucket down the field, and instead, if anything, only try to throw this ball to Sutton's back shoulder with leverage, because at least a back shoulder fade will not outright score if it's caught. We see the same type of hand placement from Sauce here as well that we saw earlier in this episode, one in the chest, one on the shoulder blade so he can feel for any breaks early in the route. And as he stays in Sutton's hip pocket down the boundary with those 2 points of contact, now we can see where the confidence and borderline arrogance that I mentioned comes into play. 15 yards down the field, Sauce is not even looking at Sutton anymore. He has his eyes pointed at the quarterback, and he's kind of lagging behind Sutton on his low shoulder now on purpose because he's intentionally looking for the back shoulder throw that he baited. He wants Rypien to try it on him, and he's so sure of himself that he has the speed to still recover down the field if Sutton does try to pull away that he's not even attempting to stay top down on the route the whole way through. He wants the back shoulder throw first, and then he can take away the downfield bucket throw after that. Interestingly enough, Rypien does try to leave this ball down the field and inside rather than throwing it outside and to the back shoulder. And so with absolutely zero panic, Sauce just keeps feeling the route and he turns his head back downfield, he locks his eyes on Sutton's hands, and he plays the ball perfectly at the catch point. On the end zone angle, you can see it even clearer. Once Gardner realizes this pass isn't going back shoulder, then he knows exactly where it will go, so he just reaches out and he rakes the ball through Sutton's hands, which results in yet another PBU for him in a big spot. This type of technical aggression is all over Sauce's film. He plays the ball at the point of the catch better than pretty much any other corner in the league already, and it's because he has the confidence to be targeted. Some corners live for never having the ball thrown their way, and they consider that a job well done, which I suppose it is. But Gardner has no issue with being tested over and over and over again. He's going to get into the receiver's hands, he's going to outmuscle them, and generally he's going to win those reps when the ball is in the air. In what might be the most insane stat of them all, courtesy of the folks over at PFF of course, Sauce has the most contested targets in the league this year at 18, and yet 53 other corners in the NFL have given up more catches than him on their own contested targets so far. And keep in mind that all of those other corners have been targeted less than he has, but they've given up more catches. Gardner has only allowed 3 contested completions, but has 11 pass breakups, which is insane, and that also leads the league, by the way. To put it succinctly, Sauce's passer rating allowed on those contested targets is only 18.8, which means, literally, I am not even kidding about this, if a quarterback on every single play just dropped back and threw the ball at the ground, mathematically their passer rating would be over double what it is when they target Gardner. Nobody has been more battle tested in the first couple months of the season, and yet nobody has been more productive. If he's not your pick so far for Defensive Rookie of the Year, well, you're just wrong. All right, that'll do it for this week. Long story short, Sauce is incredible. He is the ideal blend of size and speed and technique and fluidity and toughness and instinct and everything you could ever want from a number 1 corner. He is that. And even though the Jets spent a top 5 pick on him, let's be honest, he's already exceeded expectations. Like, he is that damn good that they spent a top 5 pick, and that doesn't seem high enough. It really is absurd how ridiculous this kid is. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you guys very soon. I don't know if I'm going to be back next week or the week after that. It's Thanksgiving. I don't know what my own recording schedule is. So regardless, I'll see you guys very soon, and go watch something else now. Bye.